Yo, welcome to the beta review for Ghost Recon Breakpoint. We're going to look at some of the positive things about the experience and maybe some of the things that I'm not so keen on could be improved. First, we're going to look at some of the positive parts of the game. So anyone who's played Ghost Recon Wildlands knows it's a very good looking game, and it's the same thing here in Breakpoint. There's loads of detail in the different areas of the map. They've clearly taken influence from different parts of the world and their different environments to make the game map really interesting. It's a bit smaller than Wildlands was overall, so I think they can pack in a bit more detail there. The character creation system is just as good as it was in Wildlands. The experience in Wildlands was deep, and you had so many options to make your character look quite individual. Obviously, creating your character's face right at the beginning of the game. You choose from a set of preset options and then customize that with facial hair and facial details like scars, eye colour, hair colour, etc. Again, with the graphics, I think it looks better this year. I think the player models, the character models look better. It's quite cool when you first see your character appear on screen, you start making it look how you want to, and I'm sure they'll add more details across the year as more content gets released. I went for a kind of design that was very similar to the character I used in the campaign on Wildlands. I felt, because it's Nomad, the character that I used originally, I thought I'd stick with that kind of design. Fans of Wildlands are going to be feeling quite at home when it comes to the gunplay on Breakpoint. It's clearly a natural progression from Wildlands. Nothing really feels dramatically different in those terms, but that's not a bad thing, because I really enjoyed in Wildlands the actual combat that you have. It feels much more kind of realistic in a lot of ways. There is kind of a good level of recoil on your weapons when you're firing full auto. Each gun kind of handles slightly differently with the first person aiming, or you can go over the shoulder like you could before. Those kind of mechanics just work really great, whether it's like long range engagements or like clearing out small close quarters areas. It just works really well. I'm really happy to see that return. And this new feature here, where you can see your characters kind of peeking around corners, it recognises when you're a certain distance away, like this door here. It sees that it could lean out a little bit with its kind of shoulder and its head, just to get a view around the corner and see if there's any enemies in the room without revealing too much of like their body. Military advisors and like combat specialists who advised on the game, they probably had an impact on that kind of animation. I think that's really cool to see. It adds a lot more realism to the player character movement in the game. And so I think, if you enjoyed the gunfights and the combat against human NPCs in the game, human enemies, then you're going to get more of that in Breakpoint. It's just a satisfying experience in the gunfights. And it's still just as satisfying to play that stealthy ghost kind of role, sneaking out from the shadows, taking people down with some cool new animations for like takedowns. You see me here like taking the first guy and headshotting the next before knocking him out. I think I get the drop on these guys and they don't have a clue where I am until they start to register when it's too late, really. But using the terrain, like going prone, get the drop on your enemies, it still works, and it's just as satisfying as it was in Wildlands. Obviously, you get the return of like the technology like drones to use to identify enemies. They have added more tech stuff, which some of it they carried over from the Ghost War mode in the last game in Wildlands, and it's quite cool to have them in there now, to use them like the intel grenades and this kind of cloak and spray thing if you're a Panther. Some interesting features that they brought in. One of the new gameplay mechanics that they've added, which I think is awesome, and it ties in with the idea of like surviving behind enemy lines, is the injury system. You get like kind of 3 tiers of health, and as they go down you get different injury levels. It affects your mobility, your ability to hold guns. So if you go like right down to the bottom level, I think you can only use your pistol. So it kind of provides new challenges, and you've got to be aware of the potential of things going south, really, so that you can still operate even though you've got like these injuries, or what you're going to do if you fall back to quickly heal, because it takes a long time. You can also see that when you're moving on terrain, like you'll slip and slide and you fall down, and that can actually cause you to have injuries as well, can cause damage. So if you're running away from an enemy and then you kind of slip down the edge of a rocky kind of cliff or something, you could cause some serious damage. They might catch up with you, you might not be able to defend yourself properly. So there's new kind of challenges in those ways. There's also the new prone camo feature, which is really cool. Just like you get down in whatever terrain you're in, and you can kind of roll around in the dirt. Your character covers their face in the mud and stuff, so it kind of hides you. It gives you an extra level of kind of stealth in certain situations. So that's another really cool feature that it's good to see. To have had something like that in Wildlands would have been really cool. So yeah, it's great that they've added those details in. Another new kind of element to the game is the use of a bivouac, which is kind of like a camp basically, where you can set up around the map, and it's from here that you can do like different things to either like improve your character's stats or change your skills and loadouts, or potentially like craft rations and different items that you're going to use in the game. So it's a really interesting way to kind of tie in that idea of survival. You can see like eating or drinking, checking weapons. They have different impacts on like different kind of stats that your character has. Damage resistance, fatigue resistance, or improving your accuracy. And if you're playing PvE, then you could all sit down together and kind of choose what tactics you're going to use for the next mission, any kind of preparations you need to make to kind of effectively kind of carry out different roles, etc. And there's also a garage you can like call in vehicles to use and get around the map quicker as well. The gunsmith from Wildlands, and I think it was first introduced in Future Soldier maybe, but yeah, the gunsmith is back and is just as deep, with all the options on your weapons to kind of add different magazines, muzzles, different scopes, etc. And they have different impacts on the way that the gun can function. Better, like maybe better recoil or better accuracy. They can have positive and negative impacts depending on what you choose. And there's also like other upgrades that you can add as well. With when you dismantle guns, and you can like maybe make them a point better on accuracy or a point more damage. And I think that's an interesting feature. It obviously ties into the way that the game like progresses and the challenge of enemies in the game. And they've also added in a feature called guided mode, which basically when you turn it on, it actually gives you more direction of where to go for objectives. Helps you maybe like keep up the pace of the story and the missions that you're doing. But if you turn it off, it's called basically is exploration mode, and it gives you a lot more openness and freedom. It doesn't tell you exactly where things are, and you have to go searching for them. It might just give you a general area of where this is on the map, and you go there and you kind of find it, the target, when you're close to it, which I think is awesome. Because when I played Wildlands, I like turning off the HUD and being like more immersed and having to think more tactically about things, so I didn't have as much information. And that also connects with the interface, which if you press down on the D-pad, you can actually turn it off and on, so you can hide like the mini-map and stuff. And I think that's great to be able to do that just to press of a button now. And like the final thing I've kind of got to note on like the positive stuff I think would be good for the game and the main story as it develops is John Bernthal and his character, Cole Walker. I think that having that kind of star power in there is good. I think he could like deliver a good performance as an interesting like antagonist. It'd be interesting to see the kind of connection, the story, and how things changed from the Wildlands when he appeared to like this point. So yeah, kind of the hope is there that having that kind of a presence on like the list of people in the game like will have a positive impact, like from just the start and experience, like meeting him and seeing him in the game. It seems like it's kind of a positive kind of thing. I think he seems like he's delivering an interesting performance, kind of with his conflicted kind of ideology of the United States and what they do, and then like maybe taking over this island and taking control of these drones and using it as a military force to kind of take over, whether it's just the island or maybe he's got bigger plans for the world, I don't know, but it's like an interesting potential in that character. So I look forward to seeing more of that. And now I'm going to talk about some of the things I'm not so impressed by, you know, it's a beta, so I'm not going to try and point out anything that are like bugs, and I think that they will solve. I think these are things that are part of the concept, or people have designed, and it's not really worked out, in my opinion. So the first point is like the story and the concept of the game. I think it's broke. The idea is you go in, but your helicopters get attacked as you're going into this island that you're going to. They get attacked, you get taken out, you seem like you're the only survivor. Every other wreckage you come across, there's no one alive. You see other people, they get taken out, and it's like you are kind of by yourself. But then you get told that there is a place where there's a ghost and he's still alive. You've got to go and see what's going on there. So you go to this place called Erewhon, and when you get there you realise they've just gone down the route of the Division and made a social area for everyone to go and chill out in, and go to the shop and spend some credits in game and get some gear. The concept being, you know, you're by yourself. You go and you speak to these two characters, and they're like, oh yeah, we've barely got anything, we've barely got any guns, we've got any magazines, you know, it's so limited. But then the ridiculous idea is, because it's online and it's a social hub, once you're out of this cutscene, there's several dozen soldiers running around, all kitted out with gear and guns, and they're all just chilling out, going to the little shop, having a browse, and it kind of breaks that whole idea that you're behind enemy lines with no one left to help you, apart from like just a few rebels or whatever, and some inside kind of help, and like a few surviving ghosts or soldiers here and there. It's like, no, there's just loads of people now. There's loads of people hanging out in this one central spot on the island, and they're all just chilling out. So we've got nothing to worry about. And then you go over and you start talking to this other ghost who's Holt. He's from Wildlands, like people might recognise him, and he's like asking, you know, how many people survived, how many people made it, you know, how does things look? And you know, man's like, oh, don't worry, I'm going to sort things out. It's like, no mate, it's alright. There's hundreds of people coming and going from this little cave, mate. There's like loads of people here. There's more soldiers here than I thought we had in the beginning. So like, don't worry, we're all getting better every time, mate. It's just, we're all just chilling out. We just group up together. There's people over there having an open mic night. I think I might go do some meditation and just chill out for a bit, you know. And there's nothing to worry about, because we've parked multiple trucks, vehicles, etc., helicopters outside, and none of their high-tech surveillance drones have discovered it, so we're okay, mate. So I know that they're just trying to make it a more social experience. It's probably worked well in the Division, but I don't want Ghost Recon to be the Division in the woods. It doesn't make sense. It's a broken concept. You're behind enemy lines, you're meant to be by yourself, your team's all died, but then you go to this place and there's loads and loads of people just running around. It kills that whole idea of the game. It breaks that concept completely from the first 20 minutes of being in the game. The next part that I'm going to talk about is the enemy levels and the gear score. You can't just tackle every situation potentially at the beginning unless you want a serious fight on your hands, or like to be really stressed out. So you have to acquire new items, new weapons that have buffs, to be able to take on like the tougher enemies. So from the first moment you could encounter a group that are just ridiculously lethal, and you cannot be protected against them. Even if you have a chest rig, you might have the same chest rig later on in the game, but because it's a special version you get the buffs. You're constantly changing your loadout. You never just settle and just play through. You're constantly changing your items of clothing, and then if you want to have the skin override feature, you've got to constantly be changing two things, because you've got to change the loadout, but then you want to keep something you don't want it to be showing, so you use the skin override, and it just doubles up things. You can't just work your way through the game finding like new weapons and new helmets all the time. Takes away the satisfaction like Wildlands had, where you hunted down the intel to find a new gun or an attachment, and that became potentially your gun for a large part of the game, or you found new items of clothing and your character wore that quite a lot. Whereas now it's constantly you're constantly changing and upgrading your gear, so you get the higher gear score, and it just, for me, isn't satisfying. and you can't just immerse yourself in the reality. Like if you want to stick with a gun, like what if I like a gun, I want to stick with that gun. I don't want to have to lose that gun every time I get a better gear score, and then wait until I find another one of it at a higher level. It's like there was user data that Ubisoft used. They thought when they saw Wildlands, they said people are using the same gun for a lot of the game, and we want to mix it up. We don't want people to use the same gun. Now I understand that logic, but maybe people like to use a certain gun. Like they get comfortable with it. They want their soldier to carry as a primary weapon a particular rifle that they like. It's not everyone in the entire community uses the same rifle or whatever. They use different weapons because they like to play in different ways. Some people might want an LMG. Some people might want an assault rifle or a sniper rifle. People had the freedom and variety there, and they didn't have to constantly change every time because the game forced them to. And then the use of this gear system is kind of, it justifies the next kind of issue I had, and this is a personal preference again. It's like something that I just don't really like and I didn't really want in a Ghost Recon game, and that's they've gone obviously into kind of a future scenario with drones, but like the gear score system and the drones, they're just kind of tying together in effectively. By doing this, we can ramp up the difficulty of the game, increasingly more challenging kind of enemy types rather than just humans. And rather than saying, which is what everyone says in Ghost Recon, it should be like one headshot is a kill. They're down. But having drones and like the crazy kind of huge tank drone behemoth things, and like, having those means you can have bullet sponges. Basically, you can have ridiculous enemy types that are just that can take a huge amount of damage, make things like really intense and like crazy. Like I'm not saying that they're not a bad design, that they're not fun, because I like games like Horizon Zero Dawn. You've got huge monster kind of robots in that, and they're satisfying to take down. But it's a Ghost Recon game, and to me, it's not. It's like the realism's gone, and it becomes this sci-fi experience. It's the same with like Call of Duty. I used to love Modern Warfare, but when it started going crazy with like Black Ops and stuff, I completely lost interest. What I got from Call of Duty and what I thought I was getting was like classic World War II experiences and stuff, and then a bit of Modern Warfare, and then it just started getting really sci-fi crazy. So drones is a kind of personal preference. I'm not really feeling them. I preferred Wildlands with just human enemies. I didn't see anything wrong with that before. I think they've tried to just make the game more exciting, increase the challenge and variety in a way, but I don't know if it's going to meet a lot of people's hopes in terms of like really hardcore Ghost Recon fans. I think people will still enjoy it, but they might not kind of get from it what they maybe got from Wildlands in those ways. The next thing I'm going to talk about is some of the animations. Like you see here, this guy is running. I'm sorry, he looks like he's running because he needs to shit really bad, and he's got to get to a toilet in time before he makes a mess in his pants. And then you can see here like the crouch walk. That would give you the worst back pain. After like an hour of doing that, you'd have such a bad back. Generally the movement, the body movement and stuff in the game is really good, really promising. But there's a couple of animations like the running and that crouch walk. It just looks strange and unnatural. I know that some things are bug related and probably will get polished out as the game gets released, but I think these are the animations that they've gone for. Yeah, unfortunately someone's job was to make and craft those animations, and they're not very good, and they're quite laughable. The next thing really is vehicles in the game. I was led to believe that like vehicles would be better, like driving has improved, but to be honest, it feels exactly the same as Wildlands, and it wasn't a strong point in Wildlands. And if you listen to the sound of the vehicles, particularly this bike now, listen to this. The sound's all over the place. Like I actually stop start, the tone changes. Like, that can't be what they're going to do with like the sound design of bikes. That must be a bug, but I'm thinking maybe it's not. And last thing really I'm going to just talk about is the changes with the new skills and the class system. Like, generally I'm completely happy with it. I don't have a problem with having different classes with different abilities. That's really is fine. There's just a few that for me just push it beyond, again, that realm of realism and into something that's very much a fantasy. For example, the assault class, where you get the true grit perk, which it gives you a boost to like damage resistance, but it also every time you kill someone you get some health back. That for me is just pushing it to fantasy lands, and I don't want stuff like that in a Ghost Recon game. That's not why I went to Ghost Recon 4. But in the Wildlands franchise, there's also a skill called Inspired, where when you have that, like, you magically get health restored to you for every kill that your teammates do, and I don't like those kind of concepts in a game which I was hoping was going to be based around reality. It's kind of, I think the game's gone off on a different direction and it's kind of lost me. I think other people will also feel like the game has changed from something that they had it as in Wildlands, and it's become something else now, and it's maybe not for them as much. So that covers it for my review of the Breakpoint Beta. Obviously this is just the campaign, and it's not the PvP. I'm interested to know more about the PvP, but I can say from the experience of playing this game, despite all the positive things, there's a couple of issues and changes to the concept of the game that have just put me off it and don't interest me and excite me as the kind of thing I look for in Wildlands. They're shifting away quite clearly away from those things, and it's kind of put me off. So I will be holding off. I won't be getting it day one. I'll be waiting for a sale and then I'll jump in. But unfortunately, the Erewhon issue and kind of gear score, drone enemy types, it's kind of not so much for me. So I think I'm going to hold off and see how things go. I hope you found this informative. Whether you agree, disagree, that's completely up to you. It's more of just a discussion point, but obviously keep your eyes on the game. I think it has potential. It just it needs some tweaks here and there. Anyway guys, I'll catch you another time. See you later.